Welcome to Lantern Voices, a podcast by Lantern Publishing and Media. Hello and welcome to Lantern Voices, a new podcast by Lantern Publishing and Media. My name is Louisa. I am Lantern's Marketing and Digital Media Associate, and I'll be your host for this episode. If you're new here, first of all, welcome. We're so happy to have you. Lantern is a non-for-profit publisher devoted to promoting ideas for a more compassionate world for all animals, humans and non-humans alike. In this podcast, we'll talk about animal rights, veganism, climate activism, and everything that has to do with keeping our beautiful planet and all of us who live in it alive and well. To keep up with Lantern Voices and our work here at Lantern, please follow us on Instagram at LanternPM, as in Lantern Publishing and Media. Joining us today is author Liz Tyson. Hello, Liz. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you very much for coming. It's a pleasure to have you here. Liz Tyson's new book, From Harm to Healing, is just coming out. She wrote it alongside with Ruth Montiel-Arias, both of them representing the Born Free USA Primate Sanctuary in South Texas. That's right, Liz?
That's correct, yeah.
Awesome. Dr. Liz Tyson, correct?
Yes.
She has helped animals across the globe, helped establish the very first locally run sterilization program for street dogs in the Middle East. She has also worked with indigenous communities in the Colombian Amazon forest to end the hunting of wild primates, and ran a UK charity campaign to end the exploitation of animals in circuses and zoos. Liz is Born Free USA's program director, where she oversees the running of Born Free USA Primate Sanctuary in South Texas.
That's right. Yep.
That is an awesome resume.
I've been incredibly lucky. I've been really, really lucky to have the privilege to do some of the things I've done and work with some of the people I've worked with. There are so many incredible people doing incredible things around the world.
That is awesome. One of the things that sparked me the most about your resume was the Colombian Amazon forest work that you did, especially because I am Brazilian. So we do hear a lot. I've never been myself to the Amazon.
Oh, really?
Even though I am Brazilian. So we hear a lot about everything that's going on there and about how the power of the indigenous folks over there, they're basically keeping everything up and running. So I was
absolutely
very interested when I read about that on your resume.
Yeah, it's an incredible place. Imagine I'm a white woman from England. Imagine that I got to spend 2 or 3 years in the Amazon, waking up there every morning, working with these incredible people. And like you say, indigenous knowledge, I think, is just sometimes overlooked or discredited, or there's almost kind of a condescending view of indigenous people. And my goodness, they have more knowledge in their little finger about the environment, about the Amazon, about the animals there, about its conservation than I could ever hope to learn in a lifetime. So it was a huge privilege to work there in those circumstances.
That sounds amazing. How did you end up from doing all of that work to coming to the United States and working at Born Free USA?
So there is a connection between me being in the Amazon and then coming to Texas eventually. So I started work with primates at a sanctuary in England in 2002. My goodness, it's been a really long time. And from there, I made connections to Colombia and had the opportunity to go out there. So my work really has been split into two for the past 20 or so years. And that has been primates, so monkeys, and also campaigning against the keeping of animals in captivity. So it kind of all linked up, and I ended up being approached to run the primate sanctuary when the former director, Tim, who did an incredible job and now runs the Oklahoma Primate Sanctuary, when he stepped down after 10 years, my unusual mixture of experience with primates and campaigning kind of made me a good fit for the job. So I moved to Texas 6 years ago.
I think it's also kind of awesome how we end up in the right place based on all our experiences, and we end up being the right person for the job. It's just very fun when it happens.
Yeah, absolutely.
And can you walk us through your day at Born Free? Like how it's a day in the primate sanctuary?
So my role is I oversee all of our campaigning and advocacy and the primate sanctuary. So I cannot take credit for the day-to-day running of the sanctuary. I used to live on site and I used to be there every day, but kind of gradually the management of the site has devolved to the team. So credit to them rather than me for how the sanctuary runs. We have a fantastic team made up of caregivers, our facilities manager, and our vet. And they care for the 230 monkeys we have on site every day, 365 days a year. So a normal day, really, our role is as caretakers. If you imagine us kind of like caterers and cleaners for the monkeys, and doctors for when they need it, because really our role is to make sure that they have everything they need. But the real focus of our work is trying to support them socialize with other monkeys. So we kind of really want to go about our work quite quietly. And just let them get on with being monkeys, because that's something that a sanctuary should be focused on, is just helping them, as our book title suggests, heal from the past trauma. So we offer, veterinary care, of course, whenever anyone needs it. Our team of caregivers are extremely experienced, so they will be able to see, if something's off, if someone needs specific help. We meet specific health needs. They get this fantastic, nutritious diet. And our team's day really is revolving around making them food, distributing the food, making sure their enclosures are clean and well maintained, and just ensuring that we pick up on any problems so that we can offer them the help they might need, that we can provide them to make their lives as fulfilling and happy as possible.
Wow. I'm still kind of stuck at the 230 monkeys. That a lot.
Yeah, it's a bunch of them.
It must not be easy to take care of everyone.
I think that the care of the monkeys comes down to us long-term experience, particularly within our senior management, of understanding their behavior. And then we also have a couple of very large groups. So we have in one enclosure, a 5-acre enclosure with 50 monkeys who live in there, as close to a natural troop as possible. And we try to have as many of the monkeys we can live in these open top enclosures between 1/4 of an acre up to 5 acres. And the ones who need really specific care. So, we have some monkeys who have diabetes. They might need injections every day. We have monkeys who have come from really traumatic backgrounds, and they're just working on feeling safe around sometimes one other monkey. So they live in more controlled environments where we can help them move along. But our aim really is, as I say, to get them living in groups, and we kind of, we facilitate them and we help them. But generally, we just want them to get on with their lives without us interfering too much.
And they all came from the quote unquote pet trade, or
we have monkeys from the pet trade. We have monkeys from the lab trade. We have monkeys from zoos. And we also have some monkeys who descended from a group that were brought over to Texas in the 1970s. So we took over the sanctuary site in 2009. And it wasn't really a sanctuary at that point. It was kind of a behavioral research site. So there was nothing invasive going on, but the monkeys were breeding. So the population was growing. And as a accredited and true sanctuary, our role isn't to breed more monkeys into captivity in Texas. So we implemented a non-breeding program, and we built the site up to the accredited sanctuary that it is today. So we still have the descendants of that original troop. And they, for example, are the 50 monkeys who live in the 5-acre enclosure. And we've got other of those, that original troop descendants in other large enclosures around the site. I'd say it's about half and half now, monkeys that we have actively rescued, and then the descendants of that group.
Do you love new books? Do you need more titles about veganism, animal rights, and climate activism on your bookshelf? Then go to lanternpm.org and check out all our books and ebooks available for purchase. You can find anything from beautiful illustrated picture books that introduce children to the values of compassion for our fellow animals, to thoroughly researched nonfiction books that give you all the facts to help you live a healthy vegan life. Go to lanternpm.org and explore all of our books today. if we can talk a little bit more about Born Free USA.
Is part of a global family of organizations which grew out of the Born Free Foundation, which was founded in 1984 in the United Kingdom. We cover a range of issues, all of them focused on wild animals. That's our area of expertise. And a lot of them focused around our motto is keep wildlife in the wild. So it's anything that pertains to that, whether it's conservation in the field. We have an incredible West Africa program. Or, it's campaigning against zoos, campaigning against circuses. It's rescuing animals from those trades. And also the exotic pet trade is a big issue that we work on, both on a legislative level and an advocacy level as well. Of course, rescuing the monkeys. We work on trapping, we work on the fur trade, and we work on coexistence. So looking at how we can live more peacefully with animals that we share our environment with.
Your book is also part of the organization in a whole. When I look at the production schedule that we have here, I see your name and I also see Born Free over there as the organization who's behind it. So I would like to know, where did the idea come from to come up with a book specifically about the monkeys, even if the organization is much bigger than that?
So the idea of the book, I can't take credit for. So my very dear friend and co-author in this book, Ruth, she is a critically acclaimed photographer, and she is a staunch animal rights advocate and has been for many, many years. We knew each other back when I lived in the UK and did some work in Spain. So our paths crossed there and we became friends. She came over to the sanctuary in late 2021 and spent 3 months with us. And she did everything. She was kind of, she was helping clean out the monkeys' enclosures, but also she was taking these beautiful photos of the monkeys, of the site, understanding how we worked. And she was staying in my home at the time. So the main project she was doing was the photography of the monkeys, but we kind of got together and we're like, well, what can we do that's going to be sort of a lasting legacy of this work? Because it just felt like we needed to do something more substantial than, a collection of photos that perhaps were just used by us on our adoption program or our website. And Ruth came up with the idea of the book. So it was a bit of a side project. We worked late into the evening a lot of the time on it. And, I think Ruth's contribution to the book is the most exciting. The photographs are just beautiful. I added the words, but I was just telling the stories of the monkeys that we love, but her contribution to this book is really what makes it special.
I feel, for those who haven't read the book yet, haven't seen the book yet, I'm going to give a brief description to our listeners. It's a book that has photographs, but not only like monkey photographs. It has the details of the sanctuary, the details of the fur, of the paws, of their hands, of everything. And it also adds the stories of some of the monkeys, not even close to 230, some of them. And then by the end, we have some articles per se with veterinarians and other people who are working at the sanctuary about the importance of not only the sanctuary's work, but for people to be aware that wildlife, it's not like bringing a cat or a dog inside your home. It's different. And so with that broad idea in mind, I would like to ask, how do you think that book can help with the work that the sanctuary does?
So I think what we hope for the book is that it will serve a number of purposes. First of all, it will tell the stories of 8 incredible individuals that we just want the world to know about, because they're wonderful. They're great people. And so I think just telling the stories, helping people understand where these animals come from, like how do they end up in the pet trade? What happened to them? What is an experience of a primate in the pet trade? And from there, we hope people will join us in supporting a ban on this trade. They will see what happens to these animals, and they will see how hard it is for them to recover from their past trauma. Another element of it is showing how sanctuaries work and how they come together through the passion of the people and the lives of the animals they're caring for, and the perseverance of both of the monkeys and the people in their healing journey. I think the third element of this that we wanted to make really clear, and that's why we were very careful in our choice of words for the title of the book, From Harm to Healing, because we wanted to represent it as a journey. I think there is a very well-intentioned misconception that when an animal arrives at a sanctuary, that's their happy ending. Everything is good, their trauma has ended, and from there on in their life is going to be happy. But it's not that simple. And I think we know that with humans. We know that if someone suffers a traumatic experience, they can't flip a switch and turn that off. There is a long process of recovering. And sometimes we don't recover. Sometimes we just have to manage that trauma or that grief or that experience in a way that isn't impacting us daily, but is still going to be there. And so that's the importance of our work. Our work, essentially, Sanctuary's work isn't really rescue. Rescue is a really small part of our work. Our work really is about helping these monkeys on their journey of recovery. And that's a lifetime's work. That isn't something that happens, from transporting them to the sanctuary, they get in the gates and everything's good. This is the work of decades with each monkey. And I hope that comes across in the book, because I think that is really important for people to understand the extent of harm these trades and these animals cause.
I think it does. I learned so much from reading it, and I mean, I'm biased to say because I'm already like the animal cause is already pretty close to my heart. So I didn't know that much about primates in particular, and reading their stories and reading some of the stories that were told in that book without any spoilers. They do tell a little bit about people almost seeing monkeys as like funny because they look like
Mm-hmm.
people in a way. And it's just, I guess, tiny humans, but it's not what it is. It's not what it is. We might be related because we're also primates, but there's so much more to it. And that behavior that might sometimes come well intentioned. I think one of the people who write about it, it's somebody who used to have a monkey as a pet, and then they realize the error of their ways per se.
Yes.
And then they ended up joining the work to try to make life better for them. And I think one of the aspects, I'm going to go back to what you said about socialization, because one of the things that the book talks about is when we talk about humans, we process grief, we process like trauma, and how having a family, having friends, all that helps us.
Yeah.
And it's not much difference for the monkeys. But once they go to the sanctuary, some of them, they don't know how to socialize because they never had that experience.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, could you talk a little bit more about that part?
Sure. So I think a good example of this, and again, trying not to give spoilers for the book, but Darwin, who he actually passed at the beginning of this year, and there are some of the monkeys in the book have passed, and it was deliberate that we use some of the older monkeys because that tells the full story. That tells, a lifetime. And we really wanted to demonstrate that lifetime, not just the care that they're given, but how their journey goes. And I think Darwin is a great example. He was an olive baboon. We're not supposed to have favorites, but he was my favorite there. He was so special. But he had been kept as a pet till he was around 7 years old. He lived with us for 23 years. And he never in that time really developed proper social skills. So even after 23 years, the harm that was done to him meant that his behavior was actually more like an adolescent. He would get really upset if somebody interacted with him in a way he wasn't comfortable with. And an older monkey, same as an older human being, we're not children, and we know we learn how to deal with conflict, and we learn interpersonal skills. And it was almost like he was stuck. And one of the things about Darwin, I think in a way that made him so popular with the staff, was that he was still very focused on us, which for him was really sad. We try to meet the animals where they are. So if somebody gets genuine benefit from spending time with us, and sometimes that's just sitting with him and kind of chatting to him, and then we will do that as long as it is not at the expense of them spending time with monkeys. So we do not instigate contact with them. We don't instigate relationships with them. But Darwin was someone who still craved human attention because he hadn't had that upbringing that he should have. He should ignore us. He shouldn't be interested in us at all. So Darwin, in some ways, he was one of the happiest people I've ever known. He was very content, but he didn't behave as he should do. And he never really developed those firm, solid bonds with other monkeys, which was very, very sad. So socialization is so important, but it's not just after the event, it's from birth. They need to develop those social skills as a child so that they can grow up and they can understand what it is to be a monkey. And sadly, some of our rescue monkeys don't have that.
Hi there, I'm Hope Bohannick, host of the Hope for the Animals podcast, sponsored by Compassionate Living. Join me on a journey to uncover the heartbreaking and heartwarming aspects of living vegan. My guests cover a variety of issues, but I like to focus on ethics, chickens and sanctuaries, the environment, anti-oppression activism, and the reasons for living vegan. If this sounds good to you, come check out the Hope for the Animals podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Some of the stories, you mentioned something about happy ending. And I think that's something that we get movies, even if you think about human life, when you go through something traumatic and then it's over and you're like, okay, that person will be well now because it's over. But there's a little coping with whatever happened that comes later. It's the same for the monkeys.
Yeah, it really is. It really, they're so like us. And that's what makes them popular. Like you say, that's what makes them popular in the pet trade, because people think, that they can be a pet who is closer to them than any other kind of animal, and that they would be kind of more akin to a child. And yeah, so it's almost that the similarity to us is the thing that triggers the harm we cause them in a way.
Mm-hmm. Which it's something that I bet, it's so twisted in many ways. And I bet somebody with like a psychology degree could definitely analyze this type of behavior. It's not me. So still talking a little bit about them. You mentioned that some of them already passed. How the others doing today? How it's post being featured in the book? How is that for them going on? And how are maybe the newcomers? How is the monkey life in the sanctuary today?
Mental health is good. we just got through the heat of summer, so that's always a challenge for everyone. But yeah, so for example, Willis, who is in the book, who was rescued he was about 4 years old. He's now 6. He was a baby when he came to us, and he really is a happy ending, I'll be honest. He grew into a gorgeous adolescent. He was tiny. He was a baby with a big head and big ears when he arrived, which is a little bit like human children. They're kind of disproportionate head. And he just looked like a baby monkey, little skinny arms and legs. And, oh my goodness, can that boy play? But he is a joyful monkey, and he now lives in a troop, with 5 others. He lives in an open top enclosure so he can get all of his energy out, running and jumping and foraging and climbing trees and playing tricks on his caregivers, hiding and then jumping out from places to try and scare them. But he is such a success story because we saw him go from this baby who really wanted human company, who really wanted to interact with us physically, emotionally, to someone who gradually made these connections with other monkeys. And honestly, he annoys a lot of them. It's like having, a 5-year-old, and some of our monkeys in that group are older. So Billy and Charles, you can just imagine them if they could roll their eyes and just be like, "Oh, give me a break," they would. But he's also got his friends. So there's Mikey, there's Teddy, and there's Gizmo, who are closer to his age, and just he enjoys life. And I'm really glad we were able to give that opportunity to him, because he was kept as a pet, and his life would have been very, very different if he hadn't been brought to us.
This is a question that I would like to know personally. Is it the same with monkeys as it is with humans? As the earlier you take them out of the traumatic situation, the better. So maybe he had this closer to a happy ending because he came as when he was still a child than other monkeys who came in when they were older.
Absolutely. When we rescue monkeys who are younger, it's always easier, or generally speaking, it's easier for them to integrate into social groups, not just kind of from their direction that they find it easier because they're still young enough to learn proper monkey behavior, but also because they're not a threat to an existing group. One of the big challenges, it kind of comes from both directions. So it might be that the monkey themselves is traumatized and they struggle to relate to other monkeys. But also, for example, you introduce an adult male into an established group, that is potentially going to cause problems to the extent that it could be dangerous for them, because monkeys are dangerous animals. You know, they're, like you say, we think of them as kind of funny and mischievous. And I think what we forget is that they are wild animals. They have big old canines. They live in strict hierarchies a lot of the time, where there is an alpha male and there's an alpha female. And, you know, if somebody comes in and messes with that structure, it can be a real problem, and it can be very dangerous. So the younger monkeys are not going to cause that instability in a social group. So when we introduce monkeys, it's a really long and very careful, very closely monitored process where we will literally sit and watch. And the first introduction of monkeys will be through a fence. It will then be 5 or 10 minutes to see how it goes. 2 members of staff always there until, for a long time, there'll be many, many different introductions before we feel confident to leave them for an hour, then 2 hours, then 3 hours, then overnight. And it's not something we take lightly. And it's not something we do without very, very careful planning.
So the costs of keeping the monkeys in the sanctuary, I think from what you're saying, from what is in the book, goes way beyond than just money. It's like people's time, people's expertise, and emotional intelligence and all that.
Our staff have to really know what they're doing, because our behavior can impact the monkeys, you know, to the extent that our behavior, if we're not careful and we're not very aware of how we're interacting with them, it can cause fights between them. You know, if they see us as an ally, then they might turn on another monkey, or another monkey might turn on them. We need to be very careful from a safety perspective that we don't get grabbed or bitten. You know, so and we need to, before we decide who is going to be introduced to who, that will be a meeting of, first of all, the kind of management of the sanctuary. So it will be me, it will be our lead caregiver, it will be our manager, and then it will generally be opened up to the rest of the staff if anybody's got any concerns, because we need to know. So we're going to introduce Lila to Gilbert. We need to understand how we think Lila is going to react to Gilbert and how Gilbert is going to react to Lila. So that means we need to collaborate amongst ourselves to ensure that we have the most information possible to make that decision. And it might be, we'll say, do you know what? We know that Gilbert isn't great with younger monkeys, or Gilbert isn't great with females, or Gilbert isn't great with males of this particular species. So, you know, it really does require, like you say, it requires a lot of knowledge and kind of history of working with the individual monkeys.
You know that just by observation, or there's much more to that?
A big part of us understanding the monkeys is observation, is seeing them day in and day out. The other thing is just time. You know, I've worked with monkeys now for over 20 years. Our sanctuary manager, Katie, has been with us for a decade. Our vet has also been with us for a decade. You know, we have people come to us with fantastic experience, and those who don't have that experience are given a kind of really intensive training where they're fully supported to understand the monkeys. So it's time, experience, it's having seen situations play out in different ways, and just applying that knowledge to what we do in the interest of the monkeys.
Interesting. I think we're more familiar, especially people like me. I live in New York, live in a big city.
Mm-hmm.
We're familiar with dog shelters. We're familiar with like things in a smaller scale that have their challenges for sure. Absolutely. But it's different than with a species like monkeys who are so close and yet so far from us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the other challenges in terms of, I guess, public perception of sanctuaries is there isn't a great understanding of the fact that the purpose of our work is to offer a home for life. So obviously a dog shelter or a cat shelter is hoping to get animals moving, get them into their forever homes, but they don't, in and of themselves, they don't tend to provide a lifelong home for these animals. Their purpose is to find them families. Monkeys are the wild animals who cannot live happily and healthily as pets. We need to provide a home for them for the rest of their lives. And some of them can live into their 40s. So if we take we take Willis on when he's 4 years old, and his particular species can live till kind of mid-20s, we're making a 2-decade commitment to this monkey. So it's also slightly different in that sense, that our aim is to always work at capacity. We don't have spaces come free regularly, obviously, until somebody passes. But it's also, the monkey's passing is also a part of our work that we have to understand, accept, and deal with, because by its very nature, we are going to look after them until they pass. So, it's challenging in different ways. And, shelter work is incredibly difficult. And I think, particularly when you're dealing with so many animals being overbred, too few shelter spaces, too few homes, and having to make those awful decisions around euthanasia and all of those things. So I think there are different challenges with shelters, absolutely, and different complexities in both spaces. But they are different.
I have so many more questions about being a sanctuary, but I will go back to our script because I want to be mindful of your time. So the book's title is From Harm to Healing. So we're talking about how different experiences of trauma, how they're different, how they're the same. So could you talk a bit more about the healing process for the monkeys? That the book touches about it a little bit. Like, what are the steps? That not everything's kind of the same, but could you talk a little bit more about how that works for the monkeys?
Of course. So the healing process will look different for everyone. Same as humans, their experiences are unique, and their response to them are unique. So if we have a monkey, I'm not going to talk about the monkeys in the book because then it is spoilers. So I'll give you a couple of other examples. Lila, who is a young rhesus macaque, she's 8 years old now. We rescued her when she was 7 years old. She was kept in a hoarding situation. And she was in a filthy 3-foot by 2-foot cage. She had this tiny piece of blue fabric, and that was all she had in there. And the first photograph I took for her, we were called in by animal control to see if we could take her. And the first photo I took of her in that cage, in order to kind of document, she was a blur because she was just spinning round and round and round and round in circles, which is a very serious stress-related behavior known as a stereotypy. Now, her story is different to Darwin, who I talked about before. He was, as far as I know, he was kind of had free range of the house, which frankly is terrifying because olive baboons are huge. And Willis was kind of found running free in a residential area in Chicago. And we have other monkeys who we know were kept on leashes. Kiki, who we rescued, didn't have a cage as such. So they've had very different experiences. Some of them have been actively mistreated in the kind of sense that they have been subjected to cruelty. So Freeman was kept again in a dog crate for 10 years. He never got out of that crate. He was given marijuana. He was given alcohol. He was sitting in 6 inches of his own feces when he was finally rescued. So the levels of trauma and the different circumstances that they've experienced is very different, and that will really inform what their recovery looks like. So like I say, Willis was young. He integrated really well. Lila has been with us for 18 months, and she's only just feeling safe to be with other monkeys. And she's still scared. We're doing a group introduction with her at the minute. She's doing very well with another small female called Connie. And she's been meeting Gilbert, who is in the book, but it's a really slow process. So one of the things that, again, we pride ourselves on is we meet them where they are, and we read their signals. If they're not comfortable, we wait. We go back to square one if we have to, and we find another social grouping that might work for them. And we work with them as long as we need to, because our golden rule is that no monkey lives alone.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Yeah, I don't know. I hope they all be well in the end. I'm thinking about the story. I think it was Darwin who mentioned that they ended up not even being able to socialize.
He had a couple of friends over time, but he found it very difficult to spend extended time with other monkeys. So sometimes we would give him kind of play dates. So, really benefit from spending a day or a couple of days with, for example, Marlin, another baboon who absolutely adored him. He would groom Darwin all the time because Darwin would never groom him back, which was kind of rude. But then he'd get overwhelmed after a day. And so we'd give him some space on his own. And then he would, go meet them again, maybe in a week. And that's kind of an example of how we will tailor things to individual monkeys. We don't just expect them like, okay, you're here now, off you go, make it work in this group. We try to make sure that we give them individual care based on their very specific needs, whether that's social, medical, or welfare related.
I love it how everyone that you mentioned so far, and it's just everyone is so attended to the details of their behaviors. You just said, oh, he never groomed him back. That's so rude. So you're very aware of what is considered rude among monkeys.
Yeah.
And you have to be, because that's a good way to make sure that they're doing well and that they're socializing properly.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's like, I think we're very aware of things like dog behavior. I have 2 rescue dogs, and I think, there's so much history of us living alongside with dogs as our companions. And, we can read their behavior pretty well by now. And honestly, even then, some people don't read their behavior well. But yeah, with monkeys, it's a whole different thing, and it can be subtle, particularly as they are animals who, if they are sick, they will often mask it because that's to do with their social structure and their hierarchy and not ending up kind of losing their status. So you have to be really attentive. I think you said earlier that a big part of our role is observing them, and it really is. It really is observing them and getting to know them.
If you're a human being living in the 21st century, chances are that you check your email every day. Also, chances are that your inbox is constantly pretty full. We know how important it is to keep up to date with things that matter. This is why our newsletter is so amazing. We only send 1 newsletter a month, and within it, you'll find all our latest news and, sometimes, access to exclusive content. Recently, we went through all our contacts and did a huge cleanup, trying our best to make sure that no one is in the list multiple times and no one's going to keep getting tons of emails. We want to keep you informed without overwhelming you with 1,000 messages. We know you don't have time to waste with 100 new emails. Give your time to what really matters. Go to lanternpm.org and sign up for our newsletter today. How do you think that people who read the book or who are listening to this episode can help the work that you're doing? We know that different people can help out in different ways. So what are all the ways that people can help?
So the best thing that people can do to help less born free and more the monkeys is there is a piece of legislation which is currently which has been introduced, and we're hoping that we can get it passed as a law, called the Captive Primate Safety Act. Some people listening might be aware of the Big Cat Public Safety Act, which was passed at the beginning of 2023. And basically banned the keeping of big cats privately across the US. Now, the Captive Primate Safety Act will do exactly the same thing. So we need to get the pet trade banned because we can only take a handful of monkeys every year. It's thought that there are around 15,000 in the trade. Sanctuaries are kind of, a band-aid over a bullet hole. We have to stop the trade. So one of the best things you can do, you can find this on our website. There is an action alert for you to contact your representative to ask them to support the Captive Primate Safety Act and try and get it introduced as a law, which will protect primates. Now, it's probably going to drop at the end of this Congress. So do it today, but also go back and do it, next time it's introduced, because I don't think it's going to pass this time around, but we've just got to keep the pressure up. And if you can afford it, if that's a possibility for you, you can symbolically adopt one of our monkeys. Again, you can find that on our website. You can adopt of the monkeys in the book, Willis. Yes, Willis is the monkey you can adopt. So you could go and adopt Willis, which will be great. And the main thing don't buy a wild animal as a pet ever.
Yeah, that sounds the minimum, the bare minimum.
Yeah, absolutely.
Could you tell us the website, the URL, if you know?
Yeah, so it's bornfreeusa.org. And there you'll see, I never know the handles for all of our various social accounts, but you will find those on our website as well. So follow us on social media, all that good stuff, and keep up with our work. And yeah, it's wildlife in the wild.
Yes, please do. I'll definitely go there and check I mean, I'm not a citizen, so I cannot talk to a representative because I don't have one, but I'll definitely check all that you just said about this law passing because it's very important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you very much for being our guest here today.
Of course, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Liz's book, From Harm to Healing, is available everywhere you buy books by the time this podcast come out. We're still, when we're recording, we're 1 week away, but it will be available when you listen to this on our feed. And go to lantern.org/from-harm-to-healing to get your copy. Once again, that is lanternpm.org/from-harm-to-healing with little dashes between every word. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you, Les, for being here today.
Of course.
And we'll talk again soon. Bye.